three words: advanced aerial threat. Who in the CIA, NSA, DIA tells at least the United States of America that we're not alone in this universe? We have never been alone in this universe.
The U.S. government really has kept that secret, not only from the American people, which is bad enough, but even kept it from itself.
The UFO community has been portrayed as conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hats, and we're crazy. And the government is now admitting that UFOs are real and disclosure is here. Suddenly, they're our friend? No.
America's defense establishment is finally admitting some of what it knows.
This could have been a chance to say we're going to collaborate with the representatives of the people in what is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people.
If what they tell you is the truth, there is no need to withhold it from public.
We've entered a quantum age, making a leap not only in technology, but also in consciousness. Companies are now creating non-sentient replacement humans. They look just like you and I. They're intended for customer service and things such as that, but these neons, as they're called, could be more nefarious than that.
We're dealing with a fight. There are forces behind the scenes that doesn't want any of this information to come out.
There's still a lot of truth that has yet to be revealed.
I was one of those quote-unquote men in black, but I realize it's probably better now to be known as men in white, bringing truth to the topic.
The problem with the truth is, the truth might be terrifying.
Oren.
Just amazing. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and happy holidays. This is a very special live stream tonight, presentation for the film, The Observers. And this also is streaming tonight to our community on a very special day. This is December 17th. And if we all go back and think about the changes that started December 17th, 2017, and where we are today, huge strides, huge steps forward. And I think we all recognize how special today is. But it's also one of the catalysts for the making of The Observers. And the overarching discussion with The Observers out there in the community that centers around the film is, where are we today? What is disclosure? What is being done? How do we keep our foot on the gas? How do we get science and technology in the other parts of the emotional discussion and the consciousness discussion of what is happening today in our world when it comes to the question of ET contact, ETCs, life in the universe, and what may be visiting us here right now. So, as your host tonight, I get to be an observer. I am going to bring in three, not only close friends, but three of the brightest people in this community. And then I get to back out and observe and listen to their conversation. It's going to be an open, frank, and comprehensive conversation with our guest today. First, I would like to bring on Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University. And let's bring in Avi first. And there's Avi. Hello, Avi. Good evening. And it's good to see and hear you once again. And I'm going to really enjoy this conversation tonight. And Avi's coming to us live from the East Coast. Over in the UK tonight, we have William Henry. William, come on in, live from the UK. A man all about town, and certainly internationally metropolitan. You just got back from Egypt. You came back. You said hello. I had you and Avi on Fade to Black back to back 2 nights in a row. And you were at home in Nashville. Now you're over in the UK. And then just north of me here in California, we have Chris Issa up in Oregon. Chris, come on in. And I want to introduce everybody to Chris. The look, the feel, the vibe of the observers rested on Chris's shoulders. Editor, production. I'm going to say this: we were under an extreme deadline to make the world premiere and get the film out there. It's been a huge success, but all of that pressure was on you, Chris. And you did a great job. The film is phenomenal. And I want everybody in the audience, they see your name in the film, they see the credits, but now they see the face and the man behind so much hard work. And so I want to thank you on behalf of the observers and the team, but also our audience today. Extend that to you, Chris. Thank you so much. With that, everybody, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I get to observe an amazing conversation. I'll see everybody at the end of this.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. We appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Thanks for giving us your attention today on this Friday. And thank you, William. Thank you, Avi. Thanks for joining me here for this conversation. I'm pretty excited to have the three of us get into some juicy material. And just wanted to open up the floor. And, with anything, I like to kind of start as sort of the beginning, right? The origin point. And I wanted to pose a question to the both of you. And maybe, Avi, we can start with you. But I was wondering, the course that you're on right now, the trajectory that you are on right now, what happened sort of early in your life? Was there any moment, any experience, anything that took place early in your years that kind of set your course, anything that happened? Maybe anything that comes to mind?
Well, the two things that reflect the way I behave right now are that I was born on a farm and was very connected to nature, more so than to social events. These were the events that city boys and girls went to, and I was pretty much with nature. And I'm still thinking about space as an extension of that, because it's that vast region that surrounds us, the biggest environment that was not contaminated yet by humans. And it's really fascinating to figure out what's going on in the big scheme of things. And the second thing that shaped my way of my career, so to speak, is that I was interested in the big questions. So at a young age, I was interested in philosophy. I used to read philosophy books, but then circumstances brought me into physics and astrophysics eventually. And the one thing I remember from my childhood is being in dinners and asking difficult questions, and the adults in the room would pretend that they know the answer. And that was obvious to me that they had no clue, and they just wanted to portray an image where they know something. And that was a good situation. The worst situation was when they would dismiss the question. And then I became a scientist, and I thought that by doing so, I will be surrounded by like-minded people that are extending their childhood curiosity and are willing to ask questions, take risks, and not pretending that they know the answer in advance. And unfortunately, with respect to the question we'll discuss today, I have exactly the same feeling of people pretending to know the answer in advance, dismissing the question simply because they are ignorant about the answer. And there is a tendency, I actually wrote an essay just today about it. There is the world of ideas, all the possible realities, the virtual realities. And, we usually select ideas that flatter our ego, like we are at the center of the universe, we are the smartest kid on the block. All of these things are ideas that we love because they flatter, they boost our ego. We feel good about it. They give us pleasure. And that's exactly what, Facebook is advocating, putting goggles on your eyes so that you would see a reality that gives you pleasure. But it's not the reality that we all share. And very often what we find by looking around is that we are not at the center of the universe, that we are not perhaps the smartest kid on the block. And it takes time for people to get used to the reality that we all share.
Mm. Yeah, incredible. Yeah, thanks for sharing that and those little slices of your life. Really great to know that you were sort of an earth child of sorts, right? On the farm, put your feet in the dirt, your hands on the grass. I think that's unfortunately something that's missing a lot in today's youth and the upbringing of a lot of kids, and something I thought and think that it's incredibly valuable, I think, to have sort of this I think the earth helps to take care of us too, and kind of sets the course for our lives. And for me, it was the chance that I had to put my feet on the grass and follow the trees up into the sky to look at the stars that gave me my natural curiosity into the beyond, right? And what's out there. And I guess on that note, William, I'm very interested to hear sort of pieces from your life. What took place for you or in the early years that kind of set your course.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Avi. It's a pleasure to be with you both this evening. I grew up in Detroit. I was highly influenced by my father, who is a kind of a maverick lawyer, entrepreneurial type, or I should say he hung out with a lot of maverick people. He worked at home. And so I was always serving coffee to these mostly PhDs. One guy was trying to mine gold from seawater. My father's best friend, who I call my uncle, was Gibson Guitars master luthier. They were trying to build the world's perfect guitar. And it just seemed like our household was always filled with these people with these amazing ideas where anything was possible. And I kind of got the buzz from that of wanting to open up consciousness in a way and explore and push limits, really. And then when I got into college, I was going to follow my father's path. He had bought a record label. We moved to Nashville, and I was going to be an entertainment lawyer. And I ended up at a small Southern Baptist college that offered an entertainment music business program that would get you ready to go work on Music Row in Nashville. And the catch was you had to take Bible study classes, and I knew nothing about the Bible. I like to say that in our home, the four apostles were Waylon, Willie, Chris, and Johnny. And I get into this university area where now it's all of a sudden about the Bible, and I'm compelled to start looking into that. And it was then that I learned about the parallel or mystical side of Christianity, and that was so alluring to me. This question of what was the origins of Christianity and who were these angels, and why doesn't the traditional church want us to know too much about the mystical side of Jesus and the connection that he had to the higher worlds? I mean, in the book of Hebrews, Jesus says, "I'm from above and you are from below," and that the world we live in is the shadow of the real world. Well, what's the real world? Those became really important questions to me as a young man in my early 20s, and still really are the power pack that drive me today. And ultimately, that is the question, and I think that we're all trying to answer as observers: is where did we come from, and what are we doing here? And ultimately, when it's our time to transcend this life, where do we go, and how are we going to get there? And so those are the questions that I think started out early on, and they've evolved, and I'm still working on them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for that. Seems like we're all sort of bonded, on this existential pursuit, for the depth of our experience here in reality and what is really going on here, right? It seems to be somewhat of a long tunnel to crawl through, and a lot of different ways that we can perceive that. So good to be in good company here. And you actually said some things in there, William, that I was really hoping that we would touch upon in this conversation. And that's specifically when you were talking about sort of the mystical connections, behind not just Christianity, but just sort of like all religions. And what I'm really interested in, I would love to hear sort of both of your perspectives about this. But what sort of impact does this field of study with extraterrestrials and the ancient world and specifically ET contact, what implications does that have, and would that have on the religions of today, on spirituality in general? What would that do? What ripple effect, would that moment, have on us? And yeah, go ahead,
It's
Avi.
very interesting that you asked that, because a couple of months ago I received an email from a rabbi in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who said that he just gave a sermon for the Jewish high holidays about my book, Extra-Terrestrial. And then I realized, well, maybe there is a spiritual connection there. And just a month ago, I attended a forum in the Washington National Cathedral. Together, I spoke with two reverends on my panel. And it was really interesting, because I realized that there is a connection between spirituality and exploration of space, trying to figure out if there are extraterrestrial civilizations. And another person on that panel was Jeff Bezos, and he was talking about space tourism. But I thought to myself, if we ever want to leave the solar system, there is no business plan for that. The only reason we would do that is as a result of spirituality, appreciating something bigger than us. And the other thing that I noticed is, when we discuss our scientific advances, we are almost at the point where we can create synthetic life in the laboratory. And in the distant future, we might be able to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, and perhaps even create a universe, a baby universe in the laboratory. And so my point was that an advanced scientific civilization is a good approximation to what traditional religious scripts called God. So such a civilization may be able to do things that look like magic, that we previously assigned to a divine entity. And therefore, if we look around and search for a smarter kid on our block, we could learn a lot from that kid. And moreover, we can look at that kid and with admiration in some sense.
William, I would love to hear your perspective on this, and in terms of what you think the implications would be, and then perhaps you can go into some of the clues. Maybe religions of today, have some sort of breadcrumbs that they've left that they're already alluding to, perhaps an extraterrestrial contact of some sort. Maybe you can speak to those things.
Yeah, right. It's so important for us to not want to dismiss or throw out the holy books, be it any of the world's religions, especially the three primary books of the Abrahamic religions, because they are loaded with references to extraterrestrial contact. When we're talking about angels, when we're talking about creator beings, when we're talking about being made in the image of these beings, the data is there. What has been lacking is either the willingness, the desire to see the truth of this connection, or simply the ability to do so. But now we're being challenged by presences that are on this planet, and we're looking back at these texts and realizing that they are not just sacred texts, spiritual texts. They're also history books that tell us about these early interactions that are ongoing. This is an unfolding scenario. I can give one example that I'm really excited to share with Avi, is that one of my specialties is the ancient Egyptian religion and their creation concepts. And in 2016, I wrote an article called "Ancient Alien Astro Chickens and the Ancient Egyptian Island of the Egg." And what the premise was, is that the original Egyptian creation texts describe a bird-like being that essentially lays an egg out of which all of creation emerges on Earth. And when I was taking another look at this creation text in the context of a von Neumann probe, an astro chicken, all of a sudden, a whole new layer of understanding opened up, because this creation text is describing exactly a von Neumann probe scenario. And then, of course, 2017, Oumuamua makes its presence known. And then I wrote another article called Oumuamua and the Ancient Egyptian Astro Chickens, and everybody thought I was talking about some new band I was forming or something. And they wanted to know, well, who's Oumuamua? And it's like, here's this ancient story that's now coming to life with a visitor from the stars that potentially could be a von Neumann probe. And I don't know if Avi subscribes to that idea or not, but that is one way in that we can talk about the connection between current events and ancient occurrences as recorded in these sacred texts.
Yeah, just to comment on your reference to von Neumann probes, I'm of the opinion that we as biological creatures were not designed, to live in space. I mean, we are
Absolutely
very
right.
happy to be here on this rock. But on the other hand, we are creating, for example, artificial intelligence systems that drive cars right now. And in the future, we could send them to space. I call these AI astronauts. They will be autonomous. They will be able to think, perhaps even better than humans, because they will be able to process a lot of data. And if we are able to imagine that in a decade or two, a civilization that predated us by 1 billion years, because most of the stars are billions of years older than the sun. And we know that half of the sun-like stars have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation. So it's quite likely that there was something like us, or even more advanced than us, 1 billion years ago, that could have created AI astronauts. And if they are equipped with 3D printers, they could repair themselves and create more of the same. And you can imagine the entire galaxy being full of those things. And as you say, the question is, what's the plan? What is the blueprint that they were designed to fulfill? And of course, that could give us a whole different meaning to our life, as you point out. And once again, we are connecting to spirituality, I think. And it's only those people that prefer to look down, that do not look up. Those are the ones that would dismiss any discussion on these topics. And to me, it's not very different from the dinosaurs, that 66 million years ago used to eat grass and ignore the sky. And they thought they are dominant. They were very arrogant. They are dominant relative to their environment. And then a rock the size of Manhattan Island hit the ground and tarnished their ego trip. And the point, the lesson from that is we should look up.
On that note, Avi, you reminded me of a thought I had sort of in my some of my earlier years. When I was looking at evolution and looking at various animals and where they are in the state of evolution, and looking at ourselves and specifically our vertebrae, our spines, right? And thinking about the evolution and how maybe perhaps the sky itself sort of facilitated the evolution. Like in the pursuit of looking up at the sky, we actually our vertebrae actually rose and it facilitated perhaps an evolution. So maybe the skies and the stars and that wonder actually moved us forward.
In this context, I'll mention an anecdote. A month ago, there was a person on the street in front of my house, and my wife called me and said, you should check out who this person is. Maybe, he's following you or because of your book. Or at any event, I went out and asked him who is he. And he said that he used to live in our house 50 years ago as a kid. And then I showed him the backyard, and he said, 50 years ago, my father buried a cat named Tiger in the backyard. And I said, well, I know this name because I saw a little tombstone in the backyard that says Tiger. And I showed it to him. Of course, I was relieved because I was worried that something bigger is buried under this tombstone. I didn't realize it's a cat. But my point is that if you welcome guests, there is a chance they will tell you something new about the space that you cohabit, that both of you share. And I think it's an important lesson about extraterrestrial guests, because they may know much more about our environment. They've been around for longer. They might tell us where there is a tombstone with the name Tiger on it.
Gosh, that prompts a question inside me. I'd love to sort of put this out to the both of you in that moment, right? In inviting the guests, right? And listening to what they have to say. And what I picture is, of course, perhaps our friends from the skies, engaging in conversation with us, and just wondering, are there any theories, and how do you either of you perceive that to take place? Do you think it's lips moving? Do you think it's going to be perhaps words coming into our minds, or a feeling, or written? What do you think, either of you? I'm curious.
Well, what's happening today is we have a global AI brain. A new layer of our neocortex is being added, and you have to factor that in. I mean, 200,000 years ago, our neocortex is activated. Nobody knows exactly how or why. It's a mystery to neuroscience, but now we're adding a new layer to our neocortex with Neuralink and other AI technologies that may or may not be a good thing. But the fact is that why is it that at this moment in time in our evolution, we're all being synced together? Is it possible that there is an extraterrestrial influence that is uniting us in one global brain? I mean, if you're an extraterrestrial civilization, you're not going to want to negotiate with 185 individual governments. You're going to want to deal with a monolithic government, a single global entity. And that's what's being created right now, good, bad, or ugly. And perhaps that is part of this disclosure. I'm sure it's part of the disclosure, but perhaps it's an extraterrestrial influence. Maybe artificial intelligence really is an alien intelligence.
What I would add is, in cosmology, in the study of the universe, we measure time in billions of years. Okay, so if we meet another traces of another civilization, they are probably a billion years more advanced than we are. Okay, so that's a huge amount of time. Just think how much we accomplished in a century, and therefore I have little hope that we'll figure out immediately what the intent is, what the context is, what is this equipment that we're seeing, and I think it's much more likely that we will behave just like a caveman finding a cell phone. The caveman would say it's a rock of a type that I've never seen before. And that's enough, to validate the fact that it's something unusual, because the caveman can press a button, see that it records his voice, press another button, records his image. It will be clear that it's not a rock. And we can tell that it's not an asteroid, a comet, it's something else. It's not a natural phenomena. It will take, of course, enough, some of our best instruments to figure this out, but eventually it will be clear that it's not something we have seen before and it's not something familiar. And then there would be this big challenge of figuring out the intent. And, we don't want to be like the citizens of Troy that accepted the Trojan horse as a gift. We want to figure out what the intent is. And for that, we might employ our own AI systems to figure out their AI systems, because it's just like relying on kids to figure out content that we see on the internet that we can't, because they're more computer savvy. I'm not optimistic we'll figure it out very quickly. I mean, and then there will be an issue of protocol, what to do, whether to engage, how to respond. And I'm always worried that, if you establish a committee, irrespective of how, what politicians say, what most people say, there would be always someone from the sidelines that might do something different. And, there is an issue of how to control the response of humanity to such a thing.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I'm curious, Avi, what in your with your line of work, with what you're doing with your project, how important is it to be an observer? Why is it important? Yeah.
It's the most important. So the point is, the one thing I learned over the past few decades as an astronomer is a sense of modesty, because very often, we live in a virtual reality. We prefer to believe in ideas that flatter us. And the only way to correct that is by collecting data and realizing, that we are wrong. It's a learning experience. Unless you are willing to accept the possibility that you are wrong by collecting more data, you will never learn anything new. And, there are people saying, this subject is considering extraterrestrials is an extraordinary claim. Therefore, we need extraordinary evidence to engage in it. And I say, the evidence will not come to you. Enrico Fermi 70 years ago said, where is everybody? And that's very presumptuous. Instead, he should have said, how can we allocate $1 billion to search for these things? Because if you just sit at home and say, nobody is knocking on my door, therefore I don't have neighbors, that's not a very smart move. What you need to do is look through the window, and better still, use a telescope when you look through the window. And my point is, observations are really crucial, because then you have a way of finding out that your preconceptions were wrong. And that's exactly what Galileo said to the philosophers 4 centuries ago. He said, look through my telescope. And they said, no, we know that the sun moves around the earth. And guess what? Suppose they wanted to launch a rocket to one of the celestial bodies that they saw. It will go the wrong way because they had the wrong ideas about the motion of these bodies relative to the earth. And the point is, reality is whatever it is. We can stay ignorant. We can ignore the reality. We can put Galileo in house arrest. Today, he would have been canceled on social media. But that's irrelevant. How many likes you get on Twitter is completely irrelevant. Reality is whatever it is, and we have to figure it out. So if we do not engage in the search for equipment from extraterrestrial civilizations, that will not remove them. It will just maintain our ignorance.
Gosh, so on that note, so we're going to go into a break in just a few moments, but I wanted William, on this note, right, of technologies and going out and seeking them, right? They're not going to come to you. Clearly, right? You just came back from Egypt. Have you been in pursuit of these technologies? Have you found anything? What can you say about that and your own experience of seeking out technologies?
Well, the ancient Egyptian religious philosophy was based on human transformation. They believed in a science of tones, lights, and plants that could transmute our body into a non-molecular light body. That's how they traveled the stars. They weren't interested in building generation starships or anything like that. They viewed our body as the starship. You talk about our vertebrae, the spinal cord, that's the stairway to heaven to the ancient Egyptians. So they had a very precise medicine as well as a spirituality combined together to transmute the body into light. There's 2 ways to travel the stars. You're either going to go out in the stars as robots, as an AI being, or you're going to go as a light being. And the light being, that's my specialty. Looking at that and cross-culturally, how all of these religious traditions tell us that we all come from different star civilizations and we will return to the stars once we learn how to activate the body's latent capability to transmute itself into a body of light, beam or project itself to another star system, and then phase back into a physical flesh and blood form if we choose. That's something I would love to talk with Jeff Bezos about, in fact, because he and Elon Musk, they're talking about transmuting us into AI or transhuman beings in order, in order to migrate into space. But to me, that may not be the ultimate way to go, that we have to combine our spirituality and our natural ability, our organic ability of ascension, as it's called in all of these traditions, to transmute the body into a higher frequency form and travel the stars.
That's great. I think that the way that I interpret that is that perhaps there's some lost abilities. Like you said, maybe there's some latent things that are waiting to wake up, and it makes me think about, if that's possible, if that's true, what took place in history to create that sort of amnesia. Yeah, and right, Chris, we're not going to kick in the warp drive till we kick in the spiritual drive. That's the thing, and that's the amnesia. We have forgotten all about what is actually unfolded within our body already. Our body is that vehicle that we're seeking that will get us into the stars, and we just have to seek that out. And this is a message that runs through Christianity. It runs through certainly the Buddhist tradition, especially their light body, rainbow light body traditions. They all speak of this, and there are examples even in modern times of humans who have activated or transmuted the body into its light being form. Well, thanks for those perspectives, William. In just a moment, I'm actually going to take us into break. So everyone just hang tight. We'll be back in about 3-4 minutes. And I'm going to play an excerpt from a very special roundtable discussion that we had with the cast of The Observers. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few moments. And thanks, guys, for this conversation. It's been great.
Thank you. We have to look at biological evidence too, the activation of the neocortex, what makes us all human. Science says it's unnatural. They don't know how it happened. They say, oh, it could be cosmic rays, group sex, psychedelics, everything but what it probably was, which is extraterrestrials. I mean, you go back into the Egyptian record, for example, you've got a god called Ptah from Egyptians said came from Sirius. They say he fashioned the bodies of men. You look to his hieroglyph, guess what? There's a double helix in his hieroglyph. Egyptologists say, well, he couldn't possibly have known about DNA. Then why is a double helix in his hieroglyph? And why is he the god that fashioned the human body?
What?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in his cartouche. Yeah.
That's a great story, William, because again, you can see the hieroglyph. It's there, the double helix is there, and the double helix doesn't repeat in other hieroglyphs.
We didn't discover it until 1952, 53, when Watson and Crick discovered it. It changed everything, and now we know.
You know what's okay? So what makes us who we are? Physicists and the hard sciences want to avoid the discussion of consciousness. They don't want to go there.
No,
it's chemistry. It's nothing woo woo.
Right.
Watson and Crick dreamed DNA.
Yeah,
that came in a subconscious state,
and then,
the design, but they don't want to go there. It's like, wait a minute, it was discovered in an altered state and dreamt about.
And then he comes up with a theory of directed panspermia, saying that this did not happen by accident. This isn't something, this was intentional. Where's this coming from?
Tesla was the same way. Tesla,
all the dream state, genius, right?
Tesla would, from the time he was a little boy, would have these white flashes appear to him. And I think for a while, like he almost couldn't distinguish, is this the actual reality or what is this?
Right.
But he occasionally would say that he would get these flashes of inspiration. But these ideas would come to him, he would say, like radio, like that was his idea. Alternating current was his idea. But yeah, like where is this coming from?
Oren.
Oh, I'm muted. Thanks. Welcome, guys. We're back. Hope you enjoyed that little excerpt we had from this amazing roundtable discussion that was 2.5 hours long and just jam-packed with all sorts of amazing topics and concepts, and it was really fruitful experience there. But I wanted to jump back in and just to kind of roll with where we sort of left off in terms of the ancient technologies, right, that are here that perhaps facilitated our evolution, and I was just really curious, Avi, just to kind of perhaps have your perspectives, maybe specific to sort of the ancient Egyptians and perhaps any other ancient culture. Do you feel that they were tapping into this world of extraterrestrial contact, or how were they observers? And if you have any insight into that. Oh, 1 second.
Sorry, you cannot hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I don't have any special insight. I'm not a historian, and I do believe that, unfortunately, we don't have all the information we need in order to answer your question. But I'm much more you can think of me as a farm boy, a child that maintains his curiosity. And the way I want to resolve these issues is by, getting new data using telescopes. And I think, if there is something out there, we will figure it out. So let's instead of worry about what other people may have seen in the past and not recorded in a way that is beyond a reasonable doubt, instead, let's get evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And then, of course, we can go back in time and say, okay, here is what we know now. And was it already reflected in testimonials or other relics that were left from other cultures that predated us here on Earth? And it's quite possible. Now, you have to understand that recorded human history is only at most 10,000 years old. And that is 1/1,000,000th of the age of the Earth. So just think about it. When Enrico Fermi asks, where is everybody? He's basically asking, where is everybody right now, right here in Los Alamos? And why would he see the evidence in front of him at the same moment? There could have been a lot of visits in the past, scattered throughout the history of the Earth. And of course, now we have a fishing net. We have our telescopes that are just like a fishing expedition where we can try and catch some fish. In the days of Fermi, he didn't even have a fishing net. He was just asking, where are all the fish, but without the ability to catch them. And there is this tale about a fisherman that went to sea and came back and said, I discovered the new law of nature. All fish are bigger than 2 inches. And then someone asked him, what's the size of the holes in your fishing net? And he said 2 inches. So obviously, in order to catch something, you need a net that is sufficiently dense. Right now we have telescope systems that can tell us. And the first object we discovered from outside the solar system was Oumuamua in 2017. And it didn't look like any of the rocks we have seen before. And my colleagues still push back on the possibility that it might be artificial in origin by saying, well, maybe it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before, a hydrogen iceberg, a nitrogen iceberg, a cloud of dust particles. And I say, well, if it's something we've never seen before, we better leave on the table the possibility that it's extraterrestrial technology. And the way to find out is by getting a high-resolution image of the next one. That looks as weird as Oumuamua, because they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In my case, it's worth 66,000 words, the number of words in my book, Extra-Terrestrial.
On that note, I'm really curious. Would there be any surprise on your end if it turns out that ancient tech is discovered here on Earth?
Oh, I would not be surprised. I just want to press some buttons.
No buttons required. Most of it's consciousness, it seems, in the ancient world. When you look in these texts, I love that. Yeah, picture's worth 1,000 words. It reminds me that when Harold Sonny White down there at JPL, at Houston, is working on the Eagle Works, trying to come up with concepts for a traversable wormhole and a warp craft. He's creating images of craft that look exactly like Ezekiel's wheels in ancient art. How can that be? Is it possible that we're in some kind of a loop where, as you mentioned earlier, we go through periods where we're awakened, then we rise to a certain level of civilization, then we lose our civilization, and then we go into a collective amnesia, and perhaps we're now in a moment now where we're remembering some of what happened in the ancient past. And this is why this technology is starting to kick in now, and why so many examples can be made of modern technology that have ancient correlates. On Ancient Aliens, we've got 16 seasons worth of episodes, a couple hundred episodes now, of story after story from cultures all over the world of extraterrestrial contact in the ancient world, examples of technology, references to technology, scientists that have had dreams or experiences with otherworldly or extraterrestrial beings that lead to important discoveries, like Francis Crick and like mathematicians and others. So you have to really factor in that perhaps the buttons will be there once we can activate the buttons in our own consciousness. And I think we're very close to being able to do that. And perhaps we're right on top of the button right now.
I think that's great, William. Yeah, I was just thinking about what it seems to be is that some of these experiences, right, some of these observations with extraterrestrial or UAPs or whatever it might be, it seems to be sort of contingent upon a person's consciousness at the time.
Yes.
There seems to be sort of a connection between the dimensionality that these crafts or these beings or whatever, where they exist, and our state of mind or our consciousness at the time could potentially induce or potentially create those opportunities of observation to take place.
Right. It's like the Fermi paradox mentioned earlier. These scientists have to have a willingness to look for extraterrestrials. Some of them are like, they just dismiss it, say, forget it, that never happened. Well, how do you know that? Have you really ever read any of these ancient texts? You really read the Bible? Have you looked into the Bhagavad Gita? Have you read any of the Tibetan texts about this? No. And Rabbi mentioned earlier, have you really looked into early Jewish history and what happened in 600 BC when they eliminated in connection with the stars and in connection with the hosts of heaven was forbidden, and why that is? These are very important questions. It's just all about, as you're saying here, the willingness of the participants to open up a little bit. We're so close, and we just need some of these great minds in our world that already have such tremendous knowledge in their specific fields to take a couple of steps out and get out of the box and recognize that the answers are perhaps already here. It's just our willingness has to be amped up.
Go ahead, Avi. Do you have a response?
I just wanted to say that, maintaining my childhood curiosity means that I don't care so much about what the adults in the room tell me. So there could be historical stories, and I would realize after exploring the world myself, that's what kids do. They put skin in the game. They often get bruised, and because they don't believe the adults, they want to check it for themselves. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the Galileo Project now. Trying to collect evidence. And my point is, if indeed the advantage of doing it for the first time with a group of more than 100 scientists, that never happened before, searching through telescopes for evidence. The advantage of that is that we are taking a road that was not taken recently. And, there is this poem by Robert Frost that two roads diverged in the woods, and he took the one not taken, and that made all the difference. For me, the biggest difference is that if you go in a path that nobody else took, there might be low-hanging fruit because nobody picked it up. You are the first to go there. So my hope is that with these new telescope systems that we are building with the Galileo Project, we'll find some low-hanging fruit. Now, once we pick them up, and if we catch some fish that are exotic, that are not from this earth, so to speak, then we can try and look back in time and say, okay, let's look back and see, whether something like that appeared already. But as I said, haven't changed much since I was a kid, and I don't want to change. I want to figure it out myself, okay? And I don't want to believe to stories that other people tell me. And gladly, the sky, most of the sky is not classified. So the government cannot tell us not to look at the sky. And, if there is anything out there, we will see it.
I found myself really curious, just down to sort of the brass tacks of those telescopes that you're referring to. Can you talk a little bit about like the technology behind it? Like what is so different in this paradigm of telescope than what we've been using before? Are you using optics? Are you using some sort of different camera that we haven't developed before? Or maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one question that I'm asked often is, astronomers were looking at the sky through telescopes for a long time, and why haven't they seen these unidentified aerial phenomena, for example, or objects like Oumuamua? And the answer is, dealing with unidentified aerial phenomena, these are objects moving relatively fast across the sky, and astronomers are looking at distant sources. And if a bird flies above an observatory, the astronomers ignore it. If you wanted to monitor the bird and say that it's really a bird, what you need is a tracking system. You need to look at the entire sky all the time, take a video of the sky, and when you see an object of interest, track it. And that requires organizing your instruments in a completely different way than was done before. It also requires an AI algorithm, machine learning algorithm that will tell you what this object is and whether it's of interest, whether it's a bird, a drone, or a natural phenomena, in which case I don't care too much about it, or something else. And that kind of a project was never done. Now, with respect to Oumuamua, that was the first object that we saw from outside the solar system. We were not prepared for that. And now that we know what we might want to look at, the goal is to date the next Oumuamua. It's just like going on a date. You met someone that you are really fascinated by, that someone left the dating scene and now you're trying to find another one. And so we first need to identify an object of interest, and there will be a telescope much more powerful than the one that discovered Oumuamua in Chile within a couple of years. It's called the Vera Rubin Observatory. We'll have a survey of the sky, and we can find many more objects like Oumuamua that come from interstellar space and look weird. And then the idea is to fly a camera close to such an object as it passes by and take a close-up photograph and perhaps even land on it. And so that's the second branch of the Galileo project. The first branch is to build telescope systems on the ground that would try to study unidentified aerial phenomena. And we're building the first telescope system on the roof of the Harvard College Observatory in the coming months, and then we'll make copies of it. And I should say one last thing, that as you know, the US Congress decided to establish an office in government over the past week. Decided that within 6 months from now, there will be a new office that will basically coordinate the data assembly on unidentified aerial phenomena from the different sections that did not speak to each other within government, and will study the data more seriously. Even though it's classified, we might not see much of it, but at least the government takes it seriously now. And to me, that's a very good indication, because it will remove the stigma and the ridicule from this subject. If the government, the most conservative organization, is dealing with it seriously, investing funds in studying it, it means it's a serious matter. Now, the fact that the scientific community is late to the party is a little worrisome, because it means that people are held by their prejudice. They're less open-minded to explore these objects.
Right. Carl Sagan was so deeply interested in the ancient extraterrestrial connection, ancient astronaut theory, and then he was chastised by his narrow-minded colleagues. He had to abandon it. But I think Sagan had it correct originally, and it'd be just really incredible to see science come back around and take a look at Carl Sagan's original papers and what he had to say. I think they would find it most illuminating.
Just to sort of put this out there, all right, I'm not sure if you've given this any sort of consideration, Avi, but there's a lot of people, and of course, we sort of have to filter through the authentic experiences and the ones that are not so authentic. But there seems to be a lot of people out there that have had very close contact, very, very close contact sometimes. And I'm just curious if you've sort of given thought to potentially has it crossed your mind to sort of study these people in certain ways? Do they have a characteristic about them that maybe they share with other abductees that maybe it's a reason why these things are happening? I didn't know if that's a consideration as far as you're concerned.
Yeah, no, I mean, we do have a subgroup within the Galileo team that looks at external data. Most of the data that we will actually analyze scientifically will be assembled by the instruments that we build, because in physics, you cannot publish a scientific paper unless you're using instruments. You can't just rely on eyewitness testimonies, or that will not hold water in the scientific community. And when you have data collected by instruments, then anyone can analyze the data, and it will be publicly available, open, in difference from the government-owned data, which is classified mostly. There is a huge iceberg. We see just the tip of it. So the innovation of the Galileo project that I established about 4 months ago is that it will assemble new data that is open to the public using instruments that are off the shelf. Nothing would be classified, and the analysis will be transparent. And so, in a way, it's a breath of fresh air into this subject, which was speculated about by many people in the public because they didn't have access to the classified data from the government. And at the same time, the scientific community was ridiculing and not even engaging in the study. And
Right.
What we're trying to do is change the intellectual landscape around it and make it part of the mainstream activity of science.
William, not sure if you had any sort of further perspective, on that matter, in your own way.
Oh, it's just tremendously exciting what Avi's doing with the Galileo Project, and it's I think all a matter of kind of divine timing in a way. There seems to be a almost like a metaphysical clock that's ticking. Where we're in a race against time. Some people believe AI will reach the singularity sometime in the next 5 years, and AI will turn and either treat us like kittens or perhaps destroy us altogether. So there's a lot of drama here, and there should be plenty of motivation to solve these questions, because we are ultimately looking at not just discovering other civilizations, but saving our own civilization. And I think these two currents actually are going to merge into one. And we're going to be finding, in my estimation, at least I hope, that we will have some help from these, call them space brothers, space sisters, extraterrestrials, otherworldly intelligences that want to bring us online into the greater cosmos. And my great hope, and at the same time my great fear is that we have enough time to be able to do that.
Yeah, William, I just wanted to add a footnote on what you just said, because it always bothered me. There are these books that talk about finding a love letter that its time has passed and was never fulfilled, and finding it in the attic when you come to buy a new house or something. And I'm just worried that if we don't check our mailbox, we will not find that package that has some recipe for saving us in some sense from ourselves in particular.
Right.
And
it gives me chills. You said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you both so much. We've sort of reached the end of our hour. I think this has been an incredibly fruitful conversation amongst us. Avi, thank you so much for taking the time to come in. William, you as well. And just want to let everybody know that we're just about to say goodbye here on the Fade to Black YouTube. But myself and William are going to continue our conversation. We're heading over to oren.tv. I'll put the link at the bottom of the screen shortly, but just so you know. And I think with that, I'm going to bring Mr. Jimmy Church up on screen here.
Avi, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you very much.
I say this to you all the time, but on behalf of the entire community and beyond that, the world, thank you. You're rolling the rock uphill. You're taking chances. And you're doing this because of your belief system, and that the quest for knowledge is more important. And bringing this to the public and what you are doing right now is just extraordinary. Thank you for being an observer. And I mean that. Happy holidays, Avi.
And if I may, Avi, as they say down at EagleWorks Lab, Godspeed to you, sir. Thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Chris, William, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're going to head over to Oren now. I've put up the links in Twitter. I've got them in the chat room. I know Chris is taking care of that too as well. So now we're going to go over to Oren, where we can be adults. Let's do that right now. And William, Chris, I'll see you guys in a couple of minutes. What a great conversation. Thank you guys so much. And signing off for now, and we'll see everybody over on Oren TV.
A shocking, hard-hitting film exposing the darkest secrets of the FBI and CIA. 1,000 pieces. There's a coup being carried out before our very eyes.
You're allowed to protest, millions of people on one day in crowds yelling, screaming, but you try to run your business, you get arrested.
Wall Street has laundered $100 trillion from trafficking in children and drugs.
The agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls?
Human trafficking has many more victims than COVID.
The complicity of the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department.
There's corruption on both sides.
These agencies are facing a time of reckoning.
Are we at yet another crossroads? Get ready. 1,000 pieces.
It was so hard to come running out of a hell that nobody believed existed. My name is Kathy O'Brien, and I'm a survivor of MK-Ultra mind control. The MK-Ultra program was to ultimately control the minds of the population for implementing what Adolf Hitler first termed the New World Order. When girls reached age 30, they were murdered or they were sacrificed. I was going to be killed as well. I was to go out in a blaze of glory and be burned alive. I'm so fortunate that an intelligence insider who saw the kind of corruption that was going on in the highest levels of government decided to take action and rescued me and saved my life so that we could begin to expose what was being done.
Ancient teachings around the world see family and community as containers for wisdom. The stability and connectivity of the family is seen as necessary to ensure that information travels intact from one's ancestors through the stable family and into the community, where it's bundled and prepared to be sent as far into the future as possible. But for decades, a quiet war has been waged by globalists, communists, and social engineers with a single target in their sights: the traditional family unit. Can we rediscover this ancient ideal of family as a technology for transmitting wisdom? Superorganism, the family unit, coming soon to Orin.
Orin.